Welcome to the Flickcast, the podcast about movies, TV, pop culture, and pretty much anything else. That's right, anything else. We could talk about anything. We don't know what's gonna happen, and nobody knows, do they, Joe? My co-host, Joe Dilworth. Joe, how are you, man?
I'm doing well. How are you, Chris?
See, I just mixed it up there. See, you didn't know I was gonna do that. It's
I
unpredictable.
know. It's spontaneous.
Spontaneous and spectacular,
Yes.
or something.
It
Spectacular,
is.
spectacular. Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm just trying to mix it up and keep it interesting as much as you can.
We're just winging it. I mean, that's what 2020 is all about right now, isn't it? Just winging it. I mean,
I don't
really?
know. These shows, as we've talked about frequently, get recorded and then later they come out. So by the time people listen to this, who knows what would have happened? But at this moment in time, we are recording this while a certain person is in the hospital, in a military hospital, and
Yes.
that's all I'm going to say about it. It's a strange time to be alive.
Life moves pretty fast,
It-
as a wise person once said.
It really
So,
does. Ferris Bueller was a
Yes.
smart guy, definitely.
Yes.
Stop and smell the roses, or whatever,
I mean, 2020 has just been full of the old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. 'Cause
Yeah, exactly.
it's like, I mean, any one thing, I think we've said this before, but any one thing would have been like, that's crazy. I just don't believe it, but it's just, everything's happening. So, really at this point, all we can do is just wing it and talk about movies and TV and pop culture nerdy stuff because,
That's right.
Everything else, yeah. So,
Right, and that's exactly right. And that's, as we've said before, that's why we brought the podcast back. That's why we're doing it. We're doing it for the fun and for the love of things and for the distractions and a little bit of self-therapy and all that stuff too. So
yes, exactly.
anyway,
Kind of keeping ourselves sane, and that's okay.
keeping our sane for 2020. Yeah, but you know what? The year's almost over. Who knows what's going to happen? It's Halloween time. We're in October now. It's pretty exciting. I know you're not a huge fan of horror films. I enjoy horror films. It's just not like super splatter ones, which I think we've mentioned before.
Yes.
Although, ironically, I have liked splatter movies, but it's just not something I'm totally into now. I think my tastes have evolved over time. And I don't mean evolve like they're, horror splatter films are terrible. It's just I don't enjoy them as much as I used to. So that's what I mean by evolved, right?
Yeah, I think I went through a period of time where splatter movies and really gory horror movies were interesting to me, and not because of, I guess, the titillation factor or the scare factor, but more from the mechanics of how did they do that kind of thing. So a lot of it too was watching, even like some of the Friday the 13th series. I'm like, well, that effect didn't really go off well, or that just looked really bad. And granted, there are some movies where that's intentional. But at the time, I appreciated movies that could pull it off well. But yeah, as I've gotten older, it's like, the so-called, torture porn genre is just not at all appealing to me. I don't really care to see people being really physically horrible to other people, because there's enough of that in real life.
Yeah, it's got to be hard to make horror films right now, I guess, or those.
Yeah,
Maybe
exactly.
not. Maybe people just need a release. I don't know. I think my sort of favorite horror films over the years have been more like psychological horror. Like, I'm a
Yeah.
Hitchcock fan, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And
although
you don't need to see the knife go in necessarily, although you can. But yeah, like you, since I worked
Yeah.
in the business of show at one point, you kind of understand how those things are done, and it doesn't really bother you as much. But sometimes they really do a good job making it so you don't go, you're like, wow, that is really disgusting. How did they do that? So
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've never been like physically ill watching any horror
No.
movies. I mean, maybe I've avoided some of the really, like Eli Roth. I won't watch any of his stuff just because his intention is to gross you out and to go as far as he can with his stuff. So I'm just like, yeah, maybe 25 years ago that might have been something I'd be like, yeah, I'll watch that, but it's just not of interest. Yeah, I'm more of a fan of the psychological horror. As I answered on recently on our Twitter accounts, when we were asking people their favorite horror movies, oddly enough, one of mine that actually really creeped me out and actually scared me without having any gore in it for the most part was the third Exorcist movie, which was a really, really good psychological thriller. George C. Scott starred in it. It just had these moments and these scenes that were intensely creepy. With one of them is like extremely memorable to me, and there's no sound in it, and it just freaked me out. And it was a beautifully shot scene and well done. And that's how I felt kind of about the whole movie. It wasn't in your face. It wasn't trying to do like the jump scares and stuff like that, but it was unsettling, but a really well crafted movie and really well acted. So I don't know if you've seen that, but
I think I did, but I don't remember. I mean, I like George C. Scott, so I've always tried to watch, when he was active.
Brad
Unfortunately,
Dourif was in it.
really?
It's
Oh yeah,
really
I'm
good
sure
movie.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
I don't really remember. The first Exorcist is really intense.
Yes.
The whole thing, but it's there's a lot more effects. But I think at the time I first saw that, for example, I was really impressed with how they did all that stuff. It looks so realistic.
Yeah,
And they did a
yeah,
really great
exactly.
job. And it's like, we're talking about. We're going to be recording our deep dive into another director pretty soon, and one of the films for this director is Alien, and so I guess you can guess who it is. Sorry, I should have just said Ridley Scott, but Alien, the chestburster scene.
Yeah.
And I remember watching that, and it came out in 1979. So I was a kid, and I went to the theater and saw it, and I was like, "What the, what the fuck?"
Yeah.
It was amazing and so realistic, and the actual look of fright on some of the cast members, like especially Veronica Cartwright, for example, who apparently they didn't know that was going to happen.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they didn't know. Yeah, exactly. And that's
crazy.
I mean, that's a great way, obviously, to get a genuine, authentic reaction from your cast. So.
Well,
I wonder.
It's definitely a way to do it.
Yeah, it's like, so obviously John Hurt knew because they had to stage it.
Well, I guess that's true. Yeah.
But yeah, the rest of the cast didn't know the extent of it. But yeah, even seeing that, I was like, how did they do that? How was that done? And that was back before I knew the magic of movies.
Well, I had to consult my old friend Starlog magazine.
Yep, absolutely.
To tell me all the
like
secrets.
That was the Bible of movies back in the day.
It sure was. And then
magazine.
Fangoria came out. I wasn't as big a fan of Fangoria because of all, I'm not a horror person. But yeah, Starlog, man, every month, great episode or great issues of that magazine. Still got all of my Starlogs.
I wish I did
to this day. And apparently, the same people who brought back Fangoria are actually going to bring back Starlog. That's what I heard.
That would be awesome if they do it.
Yeah, I would totally subscribe to that.
If they do it like it was back in the day, I would be on board. I mean, yeah. Here's the other thing too. I mean, talking about gory kind of horror movies, I think maybe I like the ones that are more sci-fi, kind of like The Thing. The Thing was awesome.
Yeah, and it's plenty gory too.
Yeah, it's got some really disgusting stuff in it, but I don't know. I can't explain to you why I would like that and say not enjoy Hostel. And maybe it's because like the sci-fi element, or like if it's a fantasy horror movie, maybe that one step outside of reality makes it so I'm okay with it. Like I said, I just especially in my older years, I'm unsettled by realistic I guess violence and torture of people, because
I think you hit it on the head. It's like very realistic. It's people that you could know, or that you could be, every man.
And it's something that could have happened.
Yeah. And people get kidnapped and tortured all the time, unfortunately. Not all the time, but it happens.
Right.
And so,
right.
But how often does an alien come from space and try to, morph into your dogs and then try to take over the world?
Right.
It's not very often.
Exactly.
But I think the other thing that Hostel is missing, that the movie we were just talking about that I just forgot the name of. That's sad.
The Thing.
Thank you. That the Thing has going for it. Jesus, Chris. Is Kurt Russell. So if Hostel had Kurt Russell in it, then you'd be good to go.
No, I still don't think I would like that, because it's just
kidding.
Again, I guess the realistic violence against people is just not in any way appealing to me. And even like the Friday the 13th movies kind of veer into that, because there's not really, other than Jason Voorhees, who can't be killed. He's still, disguised as a human, and they're still, he's still hacking up people with a machete and stuff like that. Nightmare on Elm Street was kind of a revolutionary, to me, kind of movie, because it kind of literally mined our nightmares and took us into the nightmare realm, but it was still kind of this fantastical kind of thing. I guess maybe it's like, I could, theoretically be kidnapped and tortured and disassembled by somebody in real life, but as we discussed, I doubt I could be possessed by an alien and my head split open and I attack my friends. So,
well, let's hope not. That wouldn't be very nice.
That you know of.
That I know of. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you've hit on the head. It's realistic type stuff that's almost too real. I prefer more of a fantasy or sci-fi, split to it, not split, but sort of slant to it, or something like that. It's more fantastical. Like, even something like Freddy or I mean, that's, whatever, Jason or Mike Myers or whatever. That's like, they're superhuman, but they weren't like that in like the first movies. They only became that later. So just because how you got to up the ante on the sequels, right? So you got to have the more powerful creature. But I think, I forgot about the Thing. That's I'm glad you brought that up, because that is another favorite of mine. It's great. It's like a horror movie, but it's sci-fi. But they're all trapped in a haunted house, basically, which is a research station in the in Antarctica or in the Antarctic. I can't remember, but it's cool.
And I'm a big fan of John Carpenter, so a lot of his stuff is horror. But maybe it's because, demon possession and stuff like that, that's not something that, I ascribe to as being real and possible. So seeing stuff like that is like, like The Exorcist, it was like, wow, this is like crazy and over the top. And maybe that, maybe if it's over the top and not The Exorcist didn't have this, but other movies that have, a good dose of humor, like Scream. Scream was not fantastical or sci-fi and had real violence against real people, but it also had kind of that humor element, and it had that great element of kind of sending up the genre, which was really nice. And they did what I like about the Scream franchise is not only in the first movie do they send up horror movies in general, but in the second one they do the same thing for sequels and so on. Like, now we're going to do a send up of movie genres that do a third sequel or remakes or reboots. So that had that element in there that was kind of like, I don't know, that kind of takes you out of the realism. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just an old guy, but
no, Scream was great though. I think there wasn't a lot of horror films at the time, and I think it kind of helped reinvent them and bring them back to the fore. It's a really good movie. I don't know that they're going to reboot it again, so I don't know if that'll make any difference. I don't know if you can capture that same sort of, the times are different now, obviously. So I don't know if the time is ripe for that kind of thing. I think Cabin in the Woods tried to do that too, but they didn't maybe succeed as much as Scream did. But if they were going to take a movie that was sort of similar, trying to sort of change the genre a bit or make fun of it, or not make fun of it necessarily, but sort of twist it around or whatever, they did a really good job. I think Scream was probably more effective because it was like more innovative at the time too. So
yeah, and Scream, even though I just said I don't like these kind of movies, Scream was more grounded, obviously, than Cabin in the Woods. Cabin in the Woods, though, was great because it did kind of the impossible thing. It explained every single horror movie ever. And it was like, wow, how do you do that? And it did. And it's like, all right, that's pretty clever. And,
it was clever. It was. If you've never seen Cabin in the Woods, it's definitely worth watching. People who are listening. And also Scream, if you've never seen that, it's definitely worth watching. We're going to talk about horror films more. I don't know how we got on this tangent exactly, but it kind of happened. We weren't going to really talk about horror films that much on this episode because we have another episode coming up where we'll have more of a deep discussion.
Now we have. Yes.
Well, now we have, but I'm sure we'll get back to it again.
Yeah.
If our guest that we're working on comes through, which I think he will, then we'll definitely be talking a lot about horror. But in the meantime, it is Halloween time. It is October, and it's a scary time. For many reasons, so it's definitely worth talking about. I would prefer, if I was going to watch something, I think right now I'm more into more optimistic stuff. Like we talked about Enola Holmes before, but that to me is the kind of movie that I'm looking for right now. Or Bill and Ted is the kind of thing I'm looking for right now more because I'd rather be. And I'll watch something down. I'll watch I'm also watching Counterpoint. Did you ever watch that show with J.K. Simmons?
Counterpart.
Counterpart.
Yes.
Yeah, I said Counterpoint, didn't I?
Oh, that movie! That show was fantastic.
Yeah,
I'm a huge fan of like alternate universes and stuff like that, and the fact that the whole premise of that show is just amazing.
Yeah, my brother actually told me about it. I had never seen it before, and I like J.K. Simmons a lot, so I've been watching it. But you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Fringe a lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, there's a huge element of that. I just will say that
Don't
if
spoil it.
you, well, this isn't spoiling it. I'll just say that if no one ever appreciated J.K. Simmons and his acting before that show, I don't know how you could not watch that show and just see the brilliance of the man. I mean,
No, he's great. He won an Academy Award, which was well
Yeah,
deserved for Whiplash.
absolutely.
But yeah, he's great. And if you're not familiar with the show, basically everyone in the show has their sort of duplicate in another sort of parallel universe or an offshoot universe, timeline, whatever you want to call it. And so there's interactions between those two worlds. And J.K. plays both of his people. He plays
Yes.
himself as the sort of mild-mannered, bookish guy, and he plays himself as the super spy, whatever guy from the other universe. It's great. It's a great show. I'm surprised I didn't see it before.
The physicality he has that's different between the two characters, even though they're the same person that have had different life experiences, is just, especially because for a lot of it he has scenes, at least in the first season, he has scenes with himself, the two characters interacting, and just you don't have any doubt when you're watching those scenes which is which. I mean, he's great. So
He is. Well, I'm sure that he had to sort of create mannerisms and all that stuff.
Oh,
And,
sure,
I
yeah.
mean, but he's an excellent actor. There's no doubt. And I
Yeah.
don't know that. I'm sure there's other people that could have pulled it off, but there's no reason to talk about them because he's so good. So
Yeah, exactly.
I was surprised I never seen it. It's great. I'm also watching the Utopia show on Amazon, which is also not an upper show or a positive show at all. But
No,
it's definitely into nerd culture and comic books and all that stuff, which I appreciate. But it's definitely a sort of a dark show. And I know you watched the original that it's based
Yes.
on, and you haven't watched the Amazon version, so we're going to talk about it later. But I wanted to bring it up anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I loved the UK original, and it is pretty dark and grim,
It is pretty fucking dark, yeah.
but it's a really kind of compelling story that you can't stop watching. So I'm very, very interested to see how well they translated over to the U.S. It's got a pretty interesting cast of people that I've seen in various other things. John Cusack, of course. So I'm very curious to see who he plays and how he portrays it in the U.S. version. So
Yeah, it's John Cusack and Rainn Wilson too. From the Office, which is interesting. He also plays a doctor. They both play doctors in the show. I'll just give it away.
Wow.
And then the rest of the cast is good too. But it's interesting. You follow. I won't spoil anything for the first episode, but you follow some characters in the first episode, and then the whole thing changes. There's a huge twist, which I think is super interesting.
Yes.
And then it goes on in a totally different direction that may have been unexpected. So that's one thing I liked about it. But it is something right now, for some reason, I have to take in smaller doses. I'm not binging it, even though all the episodes are available on Amazon. And all the episodes are it's just, I have to take it in pieces. I can't sit there and watch 10 episodes of that in a row right now.
I kind of question the timing, knowing the
That's true
original,
too, yeah.
but it seems like they may could have delayed it for a little while. But then again, I mean, that's kind of, especially kind of the science fiction type genre and comic book genre is, timely and usually speaks to what's going on currently and puts that in the narrative. I mean, this one blatantly so, but I'm kind of curious to see how they address certain things in the American one. So I'll watch it and we'll definitely talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. You should. I'll get ahead a few more episodes. But it's I think that it's interesting because Amazon is doing a lot of stuff that's kind of more out there now. I mean, they have The Boys, which is very, very dark too, and very violent, very graphic. This last episode of The Boys that just aired, by the way, crazy, super crazy shit. I know you're not going to watch it. I know, but
no, I am. I'm just at this point. I'm like, I'm just going to wait till the second season's done, and then because there's going to be obviously a break before the next season because they haven't been able to shoot anything. So I'll just watch the first two seasons, and I'll report. I'll put it this way: I'll see how much of the first two seasons I can watch. All right. So
it's like I'm making you watch The Walking Dead or something.
Nobody watches that anymore.
Well,
anyway,
it's okay because you're going to get a new show with the younger generation
God.
now, so don't worry. There'll be plenty more spin-offs of The Walking Dead. The franchise will not die, just like The Walkers. They will not. I'm sorry.
Isn't Daryl and Carol and their other brother Daryl getting their own show and stuff?
See, that's funny. They're getting their own show, but there's also like Walking Dead Youth in Revolt kind of episode, another series too. So I don't know what it's called exactly, but it's something
Walking
like
Dead: The Next Generation.
Yeah, or some shit like that. But yeah, so because nothing is more interesting than a bunch of teenagers trying to survive the apocalypse. But I guess
Walking Dead, Deep Space Nine.
you know what? People laughed at Deep Space Nine, but it turned out to be a great show. So I don't know.
You're right.
People are like, "Oh, that's not Starfleet. No one wants a show on a space station. That's not Star Trek. What the hell?" But it turned out to be really good. So I don't know.
Okay, gatekeeper. No,
I'm not a gatekeeper. You stay away from Star Trek. I will stop you. No, man. You know DS9 turned out to be good. What are you talking about?
No, it was a very compelling show. I quite liked it. Voyager, on the other hand,
but
was
you
trash,
know that everyone said Deep Space Nine is not Star Trek though when it first came out.
Yeah, well, they said the same thing about Next Generation too, but
at least that was the Enterprise, and people were going.
But it didn't have Kirk and Spock.
A 5-year mission to explore. But there's kids on the ship. What? There's like families. What is this bullshit?
What?
I know.
Yes,
it's crazy, man. But that's okay because it turned out okay, and we're still talking about Picard to this day. So something must have gone right.
Well, hey, and to totally, pull us in a different direction, I did finally watch something that you mentioned last week and a little bit earlier, Enola Holmes.
Oh, good. And what did you think?
I thought it was just a brilliant movie. I thought it was pretty fantastic.
Isn't it delightful? It's such she's so great. She's amazing, and all the cast. You know who I thought wasn't great though was the guy who played Mycroft. I think we talked about this before. He didn't blow me away, but freaking Henry Cavill, great as Sherlock Holmes. But Millie Bobby Brown, man, she's gonna do things.
She's just
huge.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
She is fantastic. What I liked about that movie, I mean, obviously the guy who directed it, Harry Bradbeer, has directed the TV series Dickinson. I don't know if you've seen that about Emily Dickinson, and also Fleabag, and both those shows employ breaking the fourth wall. So it wasn't surprising that this did as well, but I just thought it was effectively done. It was extraordinarily acted, and it was a great story. I mean, it just I did kind of like how they flipped that. The guy, the boy, was the damsel in distress and not her, and she, was just outstanding through it. But even though they made the love interest kind of, the damsel in distress at first, he wasn't stupid, and he was smart. I thought, like you said, Henry Cavill did a brilliant job as Sherlock Holmes, which doesn't surprise me. Now they're talking not only a sequel for a
spin-off for him,
but they want to do a spin-off with him as Sherlock Holmes, which I'd watch that.
Yeah, hell yeah, I would.
And I thought it was. I had read, I guess everyone saw the press earlier about the Holmes estate, or the Arthur Conan Doyle estate was trying to get the movie not released because of the portrayal of Sherlock Holmes with emotions, but I thought they did a fantastic job with that, and I felt they kept the spirit of the Holmes character, but also acknowledged that, maybe, the emotion and stuff was something he was purposely suppressing. I don't know. I thought it was great, and the interactions between the two of them were spectacular. So
yeah, definitely. I think you're right, though. I think that he was doing a good job with Holmes, where he suppresses his emotions and sort of goes for pure logic to help him solve the crimes, and emotions get in the way of him doing his job. So the only time he'll allow these things to surface is dealing with her. But the rest of the time, he's very stoic and very squared off and everything. It makes sense. So it totally fits. I mean, I'm not the estate of Conan Doyle or whatever, so I don't know, what do I know? But I know Netflix has got a shit ton of money to defend it, so I'm sure they're not worried about it. So if they're going to make a sequel, I'm sure they'll make a sequel. And if they're going to make a spin-off series for Henry Cavill, I'm sure he will be glad to do it, because he's a giant nerd, it turns out. So,
well, and to me, it was, Sherlock Holmes early on in his career, and he, tried to remain detached, but it was, his sister, and I think he also, it wasn't just the fact that she was his sister, but he recognized and appreciated her skill as a detective and observer of the human condition, and he obviously he tried to remain detached, but he just couldn't. But he didn't overtly hug her or rescue her or anything, which I thought was great. There was no Sherlock to the rescue moment or anything. He just kind of popped in and gave advice and encouragement where it was probably needed the most, and then left. And I kind of like the fact that at the end he walks right by her with the implication that she, had honed her craft and disguises so much that he didn't even recognize her anymore. So that was, I don't know. I just thought it was well done. And, here's the thing. I don't know. I haven't read the original stories enough to know, but I mean, Holmes, at least in, the shows and the movies and stuff we've seen over the years, was always kind of flummoxed by Irene Adler and his kind of emotional reaction to her and attraction. So the fact that he shows a bit of humanity towards his sister is not, to me, not surprising for the character.
And like you said, he's it's younger Holmes, and he hasn't been maybe affected as much by events and the things that are coming in his life. And, he's not on drugs either, so that helps probably too.
Right. And I did like the fact that, the Lord of Tewkesbury, or whatever his name was, the love interest, they kind of, in a way crafted him to be her Irene Adler. He was a distraction, and she worked best by dismissing him and getting him out of her way. There's been some complaints online that, of course they had to throw the romance in there. And here's the thing. I mean, this comes from a series of young adult novels, so obviously there's some sort of romance in it. And she's 16, for crying out loud. I mean, some people are like, after she saved the guy, she broke down and she cried after that about her mother, and that took her power away and stuff. And I'm not female, obviously, so I can't necessarily speak to that, I suppose. But I didn't think that took her power away. I mean, first of all, she was 16. She's 16, and the whole point of the movie was her trying to find her mother. So, of course, when she sees her mother, she's probably going to lose it a little bit. I don't know.
It's also her first story. She's just finding her power. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So she didn't necessarily lose it. She maybe hadn't found all of it yet, because by the end, she's definitely sort of making the terms. But like you said, she's a 16-year-old girl, and he's a good-looking kid, and they're going to have some kind of flirtation or whatever. They're not getting married or anything, and he's going on in his life, and she's going to go on in her life and become a great detective. Now, maybe their paths will cross again, maybe they won't. But I don't think it. And again, like you said, you're not a woman, neither am I, frankly enough.
Right.
But I don't know that it was necessarily her, conceding power or just being weak or whatever. I mean, she has emotions. There's nothing wrong with that, and she displayed them. And she was looking for her mother. It was a point in the story where a lot of things had happened, and there was like an emotional catharsis or whatever, and she was happy, and and then she was fine. So it's not hard to believe. And like you said too, it's a young adult novel. There's going to be some teen romance in there a little bit, and that's the kind of story you go into. But the point that I like the most about it, or the thing I like the most about it, is that, as we've talked about on past shows and on our bonus episode recently, it was an optimistic show.
Yes.
Things about possibilities, things that can happen. I can take charge of my life. I can affect the outcome of things. I can make decisions. I can do these things. I have some investment in what's going to happen to me, and that kind of thing is what I'm looking for right now. And I think a lot of other people, which is why so many people have responded so positively to it, because it's just that kind of show. And it's funny you mentioned Dickinson, because the other person I thought that would have been great in this role, Millie Bobby Brown was awesome, and I think that now she owns it. But I think Haley Steinfeld would have been great too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because Dickinson is kind of a similar character.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's a similar styled show even to this, and no, I thought that would be great. I mean, hey, let's do a crossover with those characters.
I would watch them as like buddy detectives or something. But you know what? I don't want to take away from Millie Bobby Brown at all. She could carry the show. No. And you don't need Henry Cavill either. She could have carried the show by herself, let's be honest. And she's the reason that I tune back into Stranger Things now, too, to see what she's going to do. I mean, I like some of the other people, but she's definitely...
She really owns that show, though. I mean, let's face it. I mean,
This is now a Millie Bobby Brown Stan podcast.
Absolutely. I will do free PR for her forever, because she's just amazing, and I look forward to seeing what other roles she does, because I know she'll be fantastic in them.
Yeah, agree 100%.
We should also I definitely want to mention is how freaking awesome is Helena Bonham Carter still. She is amazing too. So
definitely.
But yeah, no, there was a lot. Bern Gorman of course plays the quintessential
love
bad
him.
guy.
Love that guy.
So yeah, no, it was interesting because it, like you said, it was a good, positive, wholesome movie, but it wasn't like saccharine, and it was a much needed thing now, much like Bill and Ted, and it was full of people I've seen in other, familiar faces. Even some of the minor characters were like, oh yeah, that's the guy from this and stuff like that. So it was just, I don't know. It was a joy to watch. I will watch it many more times, and I do hope they make more and keep the same quality, and I will absolutely watch them. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's like 5 or 6 books, right? So they can keep going for a while and then spin it off. I think it should be a series. I don't know if she's going to want to commit to a series, another one, but because she's got movies.
Well, she brought it to Netflix's attention. I guess she read the books. So.
Yeah, but as a one-off, maybe she doesn't necessarily want to commit to another show, like a series. But
she seems pretty enthusiastic in the interviews, though. I mean, I guess of course you're going to be if you're trying to promote
it's your
show,
project, yeah.
But yeah, no, I would say, yeah.
I saw an interview with Henry Cavill recently. It was funny. He was talking about how he was working on the show and working with her as both co-star and boss, because she was his boss on the show. It's weird. Funny. It's sort of relating to this, to this young lady as my boss too. And I tried to bring everything I could to the role and everything. And then they were asking him about he was building his gaming rig, his computer, and how he loves the Witcher video games. The guy's a giant nerd, which I appreciate.
Oh yeah.
And he's, you know what? He seems like a really genuinely nice guy. And I mean, I don't know what he's really like in person, because who knows, but he seems cool. But she, in everything I've ever seen or read about her, or whatever, she's always comes across as very positive and very kind of together for a 16-year-old. Let's put it that way. Or how she's like almost 18 now, I guess. But
yeah, I did think it was funny that they made the attempt to like oversize slightly Henry Cavill's costumes, but he's still this massive person.
Yeah, he's not a Victorian specimen of manhood, right?
Yeah, no. So it's like even with like oversized clothes, he's still got the Superman physique that just can't help but show
the
through,
Witcher physique right now, because he was doing that.
Well,
too, right?
True. Yeah, the rumor is though he signed up for they said, hey, we wish to use you for more Superman roles. So.
Well, that came up.
He says he's not done with it yet. So.
That came up in the same interview. They asked him about the clothes for this thing, and he's like, I felt bad for the costume designer because I don't really fit into the to that sort of look. But also they asked him about the specific question was more about the Snyder Cut. Are you doing anything for the Snyder Cut? And he said no. So I don't know. Well, who knows? But anyway, I think I would watch him as Superman again. I was not skeptical when I first heard about him being cast as Superman. I was not one of the people who said, "Oh, I don't see that," because I actually saw it. I thought it would be okay, and it turned out that I thought he was. Well, I mean, he was good. In Man of Steel. Yes. I don't know that Man of Steel is a great movie, and I think we've talked about before how it's not a great movie, but it's pretty good.
I'm a big fan of it.
I know you are, and I don't hate it. I don't think it's it's not my favorite Superman movie of all time. It's still Superman with Christopher Reeve. That's still my favorite. But he was good, and I think he's been consistently good. And I was also not that upset about Ben Affleck. I thought he did a pretty good job as Batman, and Pattinson too. I'm not upset about him at all. I think he's going to do great.
I'm looking forward to that.
He looks great, and I'm glad that he's over COVID. Thank goodness. So
Pattinson's done great in other roles, so I think he's got the chops.
Did you see The Lighthouse? That thing was crazy.
Yes. So here's what I'll say about Man of Steel.
So crazy.
This is what has occurred to me is, and this is completely a pre-COVID, pre-2020 outlook, but Man of Steel was the Superman story done for our times. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, Superman in the comics has had his origin retold time and time again. I mean, the character's been around since 1938. That's a long time. So obviously, and he's been continuously published in comics since that time. So obviously, as time goes on and you get 5-10 years down the road, at any point you're going to want to retell the origin to make it more relatable to the people and the kids, especially of that time. And that's what I think Man of Steel was. It was, again, the reinterpretation, retelling of the Superman story, but as it would exist in that time, which was not that long ago. And I think it did well. It had that kind of thing. I mean, Superman was essentially a thug when he first appeared. I mean, he knocked people around. He threw people, into the distance. He, smashed up buildings to get to the bad guys and stuff like that. And there's no, a lot of people are like, well, that wasn't my Superman. Well, yeah, probably not, because there's been so many interpretations of Superman over the years, and your Superman, much like your Doctor in Doctor Who or your Star Trek, is going to be predicated on when you first encountered the character and what was going on in your life and what the world was like at that time. So there are going to be, I'm sure, kids and other people too, that in years to come are going to be like, well, I don't like this new Superman movie because it's not like Man of Steel. That's my Superman, right? So I get it if it's not somebody's Superman, and I understand that, but it's still the character and it's still the same story. And you have to allow, especially something that's over 50, much like Star Trek, 50 years old, you have to allow that there's going to be a new audience and new people that are going to be like, yeah, that story really resonates with me, and that's my character and that's my interpretation of him.
You don't think it's a response kind of to, or not a response, but sort of a relationship to Nolan's Batman, which was a dark sort of take on, I mean, Batman's dark anyway, obviously, but he did a sort of definitive version of Batman for the time, and then Snyder came along and said, well, I'll just stick with that kind of and do a Superman story kind of in that same vein, which is not necessarily as optimistic.
That's possible.
But I think
I'm not going to presume to think what Zack
don't
Snyder
think,
is thinking,
Joe,
but
please.
Yes. Well, I'm not going to say this is what, I would say, though, it's like, well, I'm sure he looked at Nolan's Batman trilogy and was like, hey, that was successful, and why not have that kind of vibe? Because, the same thing with Batman. I'm not a huge fan of most of the Batman stories or Batman interpretations since Frank Miller's Dark Knight in the mid-'80s. I liked Batman as the detective, as kind of more of a lighthearted character and not filled with angst and wanting to die every 5 minutes. But I do acknowledge that there's been some good movies. I like Nolan's trilogy. I like Affleck as Batman, as the kind of jaded Batman. I like those stories. I like those new interpretations. That's not the version of the character that I like the best, but I still like those stories and think they're brilliant.
Yeah, it's funny you say Affleck was good, I think, because he was just sort of fed up with life in general anyway, and so that came across with Bruce Wayne. It's like, oh god, I've been doing this for how long now? Shit, man.
Well, yeah, but there was a whole part of the arc that Zack Snyder was so by Justice League, and we'll see that, I'm sure, in Zack's interpretation. Batman was back to the hero. It was that obsession and that altercation with Superman and the lengths he went to that snapped him out of that and realized that's not who I want to be. And here's this person that I've been trying to kill all this time and that just sacrificed himself for everyone. And that I liked, even in Joss Whedon's version, I liked kind of the realizations and the way that Batman and Bruce Wayne had come around to, like, we got to protect this planet and we got to honor this person that sacrificed himself for us, and I want to do better and I want to do good. I was like, that was a great character arc to me.
It was, yeah. Batman. He came a long way. He was definitely against it, and you definitely could see that. And I think that Superman came a long way too. He became, he decided to sacrifice himself for a planet that wasn't even his own planet. But I think that Superman gets a benefit because he grew up on Earth with the Kents, who were great, in theory, great role models for him, especially his dad. And teaching him how to be a man, but also, hide your powers, don't let people find out whatever.
Right.
And it took him some time to sort of feel like that was okay to come out of his shell a bit. And so by the time he did that, he wasn't really comfortable as Superman yet. Yeah. So it took him a while to get there. So I think you're right. I think it just took him time to figure out who he wanted to be. And yeah, he was rough around the edges and everything. And you see him evolve over the movies too. He becomes more, I don't want to say sophisticated, but he becomes more polished at that point.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing with when he, killed Zod. Everyone's like, well, Superman doesn't kill. It's like, well, how does he know he doesn't kill until he had no choice and he had to kill, and he's like, that sucked. I'm not going to
I'm not doing that again. Yeah, that was it. He never does it again, right?
So I'm like, that. I was okay with that. So,
well, it's anyway, like you said, it's an interpretation of the character, and at some point you can't just do a faithful. You can't retell the same story over and over and over again. Things have to evolve, I think, and evolve with the times or with the new. You can say whatever you want about Joker, the movie that just came out, a while ago with Joaquin Phoenix. That's not my Joker, or that's not this Joker, or that's not this or whatever. but it was a different take on the character.
Yes.
Now, whether it was a good take or whether it was a, did it cause problems or controversy or whatever, who knows? But
that's a whole different thing.
It's a whole different discussion, and I don't want to get into that part of it. But I will say I enjoyed that particular take on it, and I thought it was interesting, and that kind of stuff should be explored.
Yes.
But I still think, if you're talking about Jokers, I still kind of like Heath Ledger's portrayal better. But that's no slight against Joaquin Phoenix at all. I think he's brilliant. It wasn't exactly my taste, and that doesn't make it bad. It just means that wasn't my thing. My thing was the other guy. So
yeah,
I liked Henry Cavill Superman. I liked Man of Steel. I liked all the movies. I just think I grew up with Christopher Reeve as Superman, so that's why I identify with him.
Even the Christopher Reeve Superman movie wasn't the same wholesomeness and origin as Superman like 10, 20 years before that. And there's been, his origin's been retold in the comics at least 2 or 3 times since Christopher Reeve and before Man of Steel. So yeah, like I said, I get with people saying, well, that's not my Superman. And it's like, that's totally fine. If the movies aren't your cup of tea, don't watch them. But to sit there and go, well, that, they did it, those are terrible, or, they don't know what they're doing, or the story is horribly written and full of nonsense, I don't think is fair, because again, as we've said time and time again, no one sets out to make a bad movie. And I applaud Zack Snyder for making his version of these characters and trying to tell his story. I'm disappointed that we didn't get to see his full storyline that he had planned, going through, multiple Justice League movies and all these other characters and spinning out into other movies, because I think that would have been, from the sound of it, to me, it would have been interesting, exploring Apocalypse and Darkseid and all that kind of stuff. So I'm disappointed we don't get to see that. But they're still making the movies. We're still going to get another Aquaman movie.
Maybe you will see that though. So. Maybe if it does well on HBO Max, maybe they'll go forward with another part of it. Who knows?
Sure. And I'd be all for that. So
why not?
There are different ways to tell stories. I mean, that seems simple to say, but there are, and not every one of those versions or every one of those tellings is going to land with every single fan every time, and that's okay. I mean, maybe if you're not enamored by the DC superhero movies right now, don't watch them. That's fine. Skip it. In another 10, 20 years, someone else will be in charge and they'll make different ones. Same thing with Star Trek. You don't like the current Star Trek series? Don't watch them. In another few years, it'll either get rebooted or there'll be a new series that maybe will be more to your taste. So,
right, you get another series to kick around. Well, we talked about that before about Star Trek. I think that we're going to get a lot more, excuse me, we're going to get a lot more Star Trek and a lot more kind of stories like that, which is great. And I don't know that there's such a difference now, or there needs to be a difference now between movies and streaming or whatever, especially during COVID or whatever. You can make stuff for the home. I still want to go see movies on this big screen, as we've discussed many times, and I still will do that when it's appropriate, when we can. But I don't think there's a problem making things for the home, and I don't think there's a problem making the Snyder Cut for HBO Max and doing another show like that, or all these quote unquote movies. To me, a movie is like 90 minutes and it's got this and this and this. That defines a movie to me, not necessarily where you see it. I mean, some spectacles should be seen on a big screen, granted. But, I've also watched Lawrence of Arabia on my TV at home, too. So it's like, I just want good stories well told. And like you said, not everybody, people don't go around making bad movies if they can help it, or bad TV shows or whatever. It just happens sometimes that the elements don't line up the way you want them to. So I hope we get to see more Zack Snyder stuff, and I hope we get to see, he'll keep working, obviously. And I'm sure there'll be more movies and whatever, and I'm sure that, it'll all go on. The world will continue to spin on. And if you don't like this version of Spider-Man and you don't like this version of this, there'll be more down the road. Heck, you get Electro, Jamie Lee Fox. I don't know who that is.
Wow, that's a
weird combo. That's a weird combo. Yeah. Jamie Foxx is going to come back as Electro. So,
he was Electro in a different Spider-Man franchise.
Totally different. So. Yeah, so anything's possible, man. Who knows what's going to happen? It's great. It's great that they can experiment. If this, bullshit that's going on in the world is has any positive aspects, is that people are more willing to experiment right now. because
Yeah,
they need to make content. They're like, fuck it, let's just do this.
Yep.
You get weird shows like, that are on now. You get like Dances with Wolves or whatever it's called, Raised by Wolves. That's it.
Well,
It'd be funny if it was called Dances with Wolves, actually.
Danced by Wolves.
Destroyed by. I'm still not sure who the
Wolves.
Who are the wolves in this show? Is it the robots or is it the
and who's raising who? That's good question.
That's absolutely right, and we'll get into that. I'm sure.
Yes, we'll talk about that in our deep dive.
You haven't finished. Yeah. You haven't finished watching Raised by Wolves, and I haven't finished the last episode either. But our deep dive is about Ridley Scott, so we're going to record that for the patrons. And you get to hear that. You'll know. We'll talk about Raised by Wolves more. But anyway, speaking of patrons, the Flickcast has a Patreon account, and you should hopefully subscribe or become a supporter on the Patreon account. It's the Flickcast Patreon at patreon.com/theflickcast. The Flickcast. Wow, I can't even say that.
You get extra content.
Yes, extra content. And if you like these kind of discussions and want to help support the show, and that would be great. We'd appreciate it. But we don't want to talk about it too much because we want to keep going with this scintillating conversation.
Well, as a patron, too, you can send us comments on the Patreon. Excuse me. You can send us comments on the Patreon, and we will probably, respond to those on the show because
that's right. Or on our Twitters, you can ask us questions on
absolutely.
the Twitters too, because we're doing that.
But yeah, I mean, so the bottom line is there are still, even in this age of pandemic and apocalypse and cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria, there's still, a few hundred movies that come out every year. Maybe not in theaters. There's still like 500, I don't want to call them TV shows. I just call them series now. But there's 500, series that air every year. There's going to be stuff that you like. There's going to be stuff you don't like. Thankfully, I'm very happy we're living in the age where a majority of this stuff is sci-fi or comic book related, and I couldn't be happier. So not everything's going to land with you. There may be something, even a beloved property, that they bring to TV or bring to the movies. It may not work for you, and that's okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. You don't have to like everything.
And you're not going to. There's no way that you can like everything. It's not possible. So don't even try. Just enjoy the things you enjoy.
By the same token, I don't think you have the right to tell people they can't enjoy that. Just move on. Go on to something else. There's going to be something you're going to like. You're not going to be lacking for things to watch and enjoy. I promise you. So
no, it's a good time to. I mean, unfortunately, it's just sort of out of necessity, but we're seeing a lot of an explosion of content, and we're going to see more of that because shows aren't going to be being filmed or produced or recorded or whatever. There's going to be a gap for sure. So a lot of the stuff they're doing now or trying to do now may not be seen for a while, and some of the shows that you love are going to have a gap before they come back. So hopefully they'll be able to go and do things safely. Because I know there are some things filming and they're having some success with it, but I also know there's been some incidents where people have gotten infected or whatever, and you can take a lot of precautions. There has been some setbacks, and I also have heard from various people that some shows are being more cautious than others, and some aren't really taking it seriously at all, which is unfortunate. But it comes down to, I guess it comes down to money too at the end of the day, and some people think money's more important. I don't know that I do, but. Anyway.
I would say if we have to mine and find a silver lining, and I wouldn't say this is actually a silver lining, but a positive that comes out of all this is that at the very least, things that we love, like music and TV and movies, in order to continue going forward or to come back, as it were, are finding ways to do things differently than they used to. And that, to me, that's never a bad thing. I mean, they're finding creative ways to continue and to, keep people safe, yet still make their content. And I can't help but see that as a small positive. So if that has re-energized creativity and made people rethink, well, maybe we can't do things the way we used to. We need to come up with a better way or a creative way. Then if that's what comes out of all of this, then that's really cool in a way. I hate to say it that way because I don't want anyone to think I'm, happy for the situation we're in or anyone getting sick or anyone dying, because, I would be joyful and jubilant if this whole thing could have gone away and never occurred to begin with. But if we can come out of this with, a better, I'm going to get mushy now. If we can come out with this better sense of community and more creativity and different ways of doing things, then at least it wasn't all for nothing. So,
yeah, exactly. That's absolutely right. You know what? I want to talk about the Patreon one more time. We do have a Patreon. Yeah. It's at patreon.com/TheFlickcast. I want to make sure that I get that correct. So,
yes.
And not, slur my words like I've been drinking or something. I have not. I'm totally sober, strangely enough. But I wanted to get that right. Do you have anything you want to pick or anything like that? Or,
no, I don't think so.
Oh, really?
See, I would have picked Enola Holmes because I'm really enamored by that movie right now. Yeah, I've used enamored more than I've ever used before in this show. But
okay. The one thing we talk about movies and TV a lot on the show because that's what we talk about a lot. But I also am a big fan of music, and I know you are too, Joe. One thing that's also been really good for me during this time has been listening to music, listening to stuff I used to listen to when I was a kid. Brings back a lot of good memories, and all the essential albums when I was growing up and all that. But also, I've been recently revisiting a lot of jazz and stuff like that too, which I enjoy a lot. So I was just going to mention that I watched the movie Whiplash again recently. And if you've not seen that, because we talked about J.K. Simmons earlier, J.K. Simmons won the Academy Award for Whiplash, playing the teacher in that movie. And if you like jazz, and if you ever were a drummer, you can totally relate, because I was a drummer back in the day. I totally relate to the movie. It's a great movie, and the fact that they only made it for like $3.5 million, it looks great. And that kid who made it goes on to do some pretty good things. I mean, I think he won something for his next movie, La La Land, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, I'm just joking. Yeah, of course he did.
Of course, a little-known movie.
A little-known movie called La La Land, yeah. And then he did First Man, so he's had quite a nice career so far. And then he's also got a show on Netflix called The Eddy, which is also about a jazz club in Paris, which is also a great show, too. I said also at least twice in that sentence, which is not a great sentence. Also, I said it again. I definitely recommend that show as well. But if you haven't seen Whiplash, it's quite good. And I wouldn't say it's what's the word? We're talking about optimism. It's optimistic. It's definitely intense in some areas because the J.K. Simmons is very intense in the movie, and from everything I've ever seen, he's not like that in real life, which is nice because I can't imagine what that would be like to live with. But it's a great movie. It's definitely worth watching. And the series is great too, so I would definitely recommend both of those. And you know what? Go back to your old albums and dust them off if you have any albums or records, in case people don't know what I'm talking about.
Records, wow.
Or CDs, or MPs or whatever. Go to Apple Music or wherever people get music, Spotify and all that stuff, and wherever you can find the Flickcast podcast. We're also on all those platforms too. They also play music as well, so you can do both.
You can find the music there as well as our Halloween playlist too. So.
That's right. We have a Halloween playlist. We should mention that. We have a Halloween playlist on Spotify now, so you should definitely check that out with some good Halloween-themed type music, which is, both scary and fun. I don't think Halloween should be totally scary. I think it should be fun too. Because there's kids. Yes. Kids like to trick-or-treat, and you don't want to scare the crap out of them. Although this year, I don't know what Halloween's going to look like, but it's at least we can still try to enjoy it given the situation. But
absolutely. All right, so maybe I do have a pick.
Yeah, I knew you would. I just wanted to talk long enough to make you think of it.
All right. So I do have a pick. It's a technology, and I won't rant about it and elaborate about it too much. But I recently got a 3D printer, and 3D printing is something that has been an interest of mine for many, many years. I would say a couple decades at least. I've had jobs where I have encountered 3D printers that have been used in those jobs to either print demos or things like that. And it just has been a technology that I've been obsessed with and interested in, and we're finally in the age where 3D printers are affordable. I mean, I got mine for less than the price of a gaming console, and that just blows me away. It's a fascinating hobby. The thing I really liked about it is the 3D printer that I got, and I got the Creality Ender 3 Pro, and that's a very good entry point printer in my opinion. The cool thing about it is the whole thing came in a box completely disassembled, so I had to put the entire thing together, and I learned a lot in putting together. I mean, I even broke a piece. I broke it putting it together, and it cost me $5 to get a replacement piece. and I learned something from that. I learned how the whole thing goes together. I learned how it works. And there's a great 3D printing community. For it just so happens that the one that I got is one of the most popular printers out there, and there's tons of mods, there's tons of upgrades for it, and surprisingly enough, several of the modifications and upgrades I can do to it, I can print out on my 3D printer, which is crazy. So it's a great hobby. It speaks to my creativity. It speaks to the fact that I'm a technology nerd. So it's something that I can see I'll be constantly refining, something that I will be enjoying for quite a while. My kids are interested in it. When I'm printing off stuff, it takes a few hours sometimes, depending on what I'm doing. They'll come in every few minutes and look at what's going on. I'm printing out things for them. If there's like things around the house that break that are plastic, or things they would be like, that'd be cool to have, I can just print them out. It's a very fascinating technology to me, and it's you can probably tell as I'm babbling on about it that it's really opened up my creativity and interest, and it's a lot of fun. I don't know, it's great.
It sounds
if
fun.
you've got
What's the first thing you're gonna make? You're gonna make miniatures for games and stuff?
I'm going to make a lot of spaceships, Star Trek, Star Wars, stuff like that. I've already printed out. So here's the cool thing: is I printed out a Enterprise, original series Enterprise, and because of the way it printed, pulling some of the supports and stuff off, I actually broke it in a couple places. But I could just super glue it together, and you actually can't tell that it was ever broken. I'm still tweaking the quality of it. But I already have plans that in the garage I'm going to set up a little painting area so that I can paint some of these things and learn that. But it's also sparked my interest in learning, creating things in 3D like Blender and stuff like that, creating my own things and printing them out. There's a ton of patterns. There's huge amount of patterns you can find for about anything you want. But I'm excited to get in and actually create something of my own and print that out. So
Joe is taking requests. If you have anything you want printed,
yes, absolutely, there you go. So
no, I'm joking, of course.
It's pretty great. It's a really fun hobby, and I'm quite enjoying it. And the cool thing too is, like I said, not only is the printer itself inexpensive, but the items to upgrade it and modify it are really cheap themselves. So there you go. Anyway.
Yeah, that's cool. I wanted to get one of those myself. I just don't need another hobby right now, unfortunately. I have too many hobbies and too many, I don't know, I want to say pits to throw money in, but there's a lot of those right now. So I think I won't. I would curious to hear your results though, and I'm sure you'll tell us about it when you get some stuff and post some to the Instagram so people can see what it looks like.
Well, so here's the thing. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm not sure. I think I'll get it done the weekend we're recording this. It might take a few days, but I'm actually one of the things that people do is set up a webcam on their
there you go
3D printer so that you can broadcast basically your jobs or do time lapse videos of your print job. So I will. That's coming soon. So maybe I'll let the TheFlickcast social media team know when I have that set up. So we can.
That's right. Yeah, we should definitely put those videos on Instagram and maybe even start a Twitch channel just for Joe's. Joe's 3D printing streaming 24.
I don't think anyone will be that interested in it. But
come on, 24/7 3D printing. That sounds awesome.
There you go.
So cool. I'll definitely am interested. I'm not kidding. I really wanted one. I've been going to for my D&D stuff. I've been going to Hero Forge to get stuff printed.
Nice. So here's the thing. I have, like I said, I've been interested in it in years, and one of my coworkers, actually my co-manager at my day job, has had one for about 3 or 4 years. And he's been talking about it quite a lot at work. And then he started showing me videos and showing me what he was printing and the stuff he'd printed. And I was just like, I got to have one of those. And thankfully, I said the community for this is huge and very helpful. But he's just like, here's some of the software you need to use. And he's like, when you get that loaded and you're ready to use it, I'll share my screen. I'll show you stuff to do to tweak it and make it work right and stuff like that. So he's been very helpful. And kind of my entryway into the the hobby. So it's, I would say, if it's something you're interested in, definitely reach out and find the community. But, if you know someone that is into it and already well established, reach out to them. And I think you'll find they'll be very happy to show you the ropes and help you out in any way. So
cool. Well, that's nice that there's a community, because sometimes, as we've talked about, there's a barrier to entry, or people are, dicks about it or something, and they don't want new people to come in. So,
no, they're very, very welcoming.
But you're not a woman or whatever. Maybe it's easier for you.
There's quite a lot of females and kids. That
good. That's good. Well, it sounds like a family thing, right? Yeah. People can get together. Yeah. It's like Pokemon Go from a few years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So that sounds like fun. Cool. Yeah. So find the Flickcast at TheFlickcast.com. Find us on Twitter and Instagram and Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Google and iHeartRadio and a bunch of other places. Wherever you find podcasts, chances are, if you already listen to the show right now, you already know where to find it. I said already twice too. Boy, I'm just not doing a great job today. Anyway, and we do a Patreon.
If you wanted on a different thing, we're on there too. We're everywhere.
We're probably everywhere. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you can always go to the website if you just want to download from there. That's fine too, flickcast.com. But yeah, look for us all over the place, and interact with the social media on Twitter and whatnot. And go to the Patreon if you feel like supporting the show, and we'll keep making some content. And I'll do a better job next time. I feel like I did not do a very good job this week, but I'm trying, man. I'm trying.
No, we're doing good. We're doing good. Yes. So we're just getting started, as they say. So.
I appreciate your confidence. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So for Joe Dilworth, I'm Chris Ulrich. That was the Flickcast. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, everybody.